Hey everybody, an exciting day. So we have had the Headrush 2.4 firmware update drop officially to the public finally, and there's some really cool stuff in it. So we have the ENGL Powerball amp with all 4 channels, the clean crunch and the high and low leads, with a lot of the cool options that are available on the real amp. And then we have some stuff in the distortion categories. I think the much awaited Boss Super Overdrive is finally in there. Then we have, for our fuzz lovers out there, we have the Dunlop JH-OC1 Octavio, the one made famous by, of course, Jimi Hendrix. And then we have the DOD Preamp Distortion 250, which is an interesting little guy. And then last but not least, we have the Darkglass B7K Ultra V2 for all of our bass players out there, so they finally get some love. And then the only other thing I can think of is it does look like there's at least an improved or altered interface for the built-in tuner on the Headrush units. I don't know if it functions any better, but it definitely does look different. So let's go check each of these things out. Except for the Darkglass. I'll be covering that in another video when I have a bass available to me. We're just going to cover the guitar-centered stuff. Thanks, guys. Alright, so the Boss Super Overdrive, the famous little yellow guy, can be somewhat compared to the famous little green guy, the Ibanez Tube Screamer. They are somewhat similar. I would say that the Boss Super Overdrive is a little more polite in the mids, a little more usable overall as a standalone overdrive instead of just a boost for an amp that's already on the edge of breakup or distorted. So basically, I've got a stock JCM 800, the 100 watter going on here, and a bunch of my usual stuff. If you watch my channel, you'll know what most of this is that's going on in here. But basically, this is what the stock this is what the JCM 800 sounds like, not boosted. Alright, so it's pretty aggressive, but it's not super distorted yet. You can always add a little bit of drive to that. So some pretty typical settings is the drive all the way down, level all the way up, and just a little bit of extra juice above the 50% mark from the tone section of the pedal. So pretty much how I use the Tube Screamers, you know, that kind of thing. So let's turn that on. Well, first let's hear it real quick without again, and then I'll turn it on real quick. So pretty much does what a typical boost pedal would do, sends a little more juice into the front of the amp, makes everything a little hotter and tighter, so as expected. So if you can of course turn the drive up a little bit more to your desired level. Let's do like 30 into this guy, and let's turn on some delay. We'll do some lead stuff, right? Right, so just awesome pedal to combine with a Marshall. It's great with Plexis, it's great with the JTM 45, it's great with the JCM 800, all that stuff. So kind of like Marshalls and Gibson, these two things really just seem made for each other. But Let's hear that again with just some rhythm stuff at those settings. Right, so it's still tight and bright in a good way. This pedal doesn't really mush out all that early. There's still, there's a lot of note definition and stuff. Of course, all of that really depends on how you have the amp set. If the amp is really, really cooking, then you won't get that. You'll just get more compression and kind of mush, and it won't be all that great. But we've got some pretty middle of the road settings. So let's just throw in the Soldano real quick. We'll turn this off again. I like to use the fake Soldano, I call it, the one that Headrush made up, the extended range one. So I've got settings on it like this. You can see real quick if you need to see all that. Okay, here's what that sounds like on its own. Here. I really have the power amp section of that Soldano cooking, which kind of causes it to get a little bit darker. But if we just fix that up a little bit in the other direction, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll keep the EQ where it is the bright switch on. Bright switch is on. Alright, turn the gain up to 30 on this guy. It's pretty reasonable. Sounds like this. That could definitely do with some tightening, which we'll now take the drive all the way back down and turn that drive back on. That just really sends that amp over the edge and gives you a really awesome smooth lead tone there. And yeah, I think I'm about done with dirty amps on this guy, so let's just see what this does to something like, say, let's take the a Blackface Deluxe. Right, so this guy at stock settings sounds like this. Fairly clean. We'll do the Fender Magic 6 settings. We'll take the bass down to 2, treble to 6, and that's it for EQ on this amp. And that sounds like this. Right, and then you've got some presets in here. This is what the default looks like, so let's just hear that. So sounds really good. It sounds pretty open, even for a notoriously mid-humped overdrive. Like I said, it's less of a hump, and in a slightly different area than a tube screamer, as far as the Q is concerned. So really great overdrive pedal. I think Headrush hit the nail on the head with this one. And let's move on. All right, so let's check out the DOD Overdrive Preamp 250. This little yellow guy came out in the late 70s, and it's got a very noticeable mid scoop and a lot of bass to it, and definitely a little bit of a cut in the high end. There's some kind of weird grit going on in there. Honestly, to use this pedal as a standalone distortion pedal into like a clean amp, like a pedal platform amp, terrible idea. It just sounds awful. But it does make a pretty great boost for a certain kind of sound with like edge of breakup amps that are also already mid-heavy. So probably not so much for like a blackface Fender type amp, or even like some kind of scooped sounding 6L6 like modern high gain amp. I really wouldn't recommend this pedal as a boost for that. But with like Voxes and Marshalls, it actually does a pretty decent job. I always think there's better choices than this, but you know, sometimes you just got to work with what you got. So let's hear some stuff. I have a Fender twin reverb, a blackface twin reverb going on here, and with nothing applied, that sounds like this. All right, and then we have the D250 drive, and this setting right here is the default that it comes with. They actually did a pretty good job on this graphic here too, I think. But anyway, let's turn that on and see what happens. All the meat dropped out of your sound. There's no mids there whatsoever. The bass seems to have become much looser. The high end is gone, and has a strange gritty quality, not that pleasing of a like you know, like Marshall-y bite kind of quality to it or anything like that. So really don't recommend it for as a standalone overdrive pedal for clean amps. But let's just mess around with some settings here. So we'll keep the level where it is, and we'll turn the gain up a bit. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it helps any. And it doesn't. It just doesn't sound good. Really not a pedal that's gonna work this way. It made sense for a pedal to maybe be voiced this way when it came out in the late 70s, just because amps were naturally much more mid-heavy. You had like the Tweed Fender stuff, Bassmans, were still heavily in use. And then obviously Marshall and some Vox stuff was in use. All three of those kinds of amp categories did have some more mids and that kind of stuff. So it will sound good through something like that. We are going somewhere with this, I promise. So let's just turn that off, and we'll start right off in the say like higher gain category, right? I've got my my JCM 800 pulled up again. The 100 watter sounds like this. And with the DOD on, we'll go back to those default settings. That sounds like this. So some woolliness in the bass there, but for some people in some genres, With some guitars, this is desirable. I think it would definitely aid like a weaker single coil pickup. Let's try my middle single coil here and see how that sounds. Alright. Not that great, but maybe like a like a Strat bridge single coil that would pair well with. We'll try a different preset here as well. Let's do it in boost settings. So the level stayed the same. The gain is 38%. Let's hear that. Just cannot get rid of that super bassy quality. Let's try more of a boost that I would use. So level all the way up, gain all the way down, and we have no EQ on this at all. Alright, how's that sound without it? So, playing leads on this JCM 800 without any kind of boost, it does sound a little thin. It's a little too bitey, right? There's not a ton of gain going on there. It doesn't feel very nice under the fingers. It's a little bit rough. But this does help with that. At those settings, level all the way up and the gain all the way down. Right, it kind of rounds out the notes a little bit, adds a little extra juice into the front of the amp, so usable for that kind of thing. Again, there are better options. Let's add just a little bit of gain. You can hear on those lower strings, it's even with a little bit of gain applied, it's got almost like a fuzz-like quality to it. But enough of that. Let's check this out with, let's go with a Vox. Let's do an AC30 here. I'll just go with the stock one. Did I pass it? I did. So here we've got the AC30. We'll do it at stock settings. We won't be tweaking any of that today. Without anything, that sounds like this. Cool, so all the Vox chime is there. Let's go with Headrush's default again. And that sounds like this. Right, so it's doing the same thing. It's cutting out some mids. It's kicking the bass way up. And the highs almost kind of get buried in there under some strange kind of grit. But let's try that again with the level all the way up, gain all the way down. I think the gain knob is the offender on this one. But let's hear how that sounds. Add some gain back in. We'll go with 10. Alright, so I'd probably maybe, I'm sure there's someone that works for. Let's hear what that sounds like with the gain all the way up. to cancel this video and start it over. Alright, so, sorry, things got a little crazy there. Never mind what happened, but, basically, it does seem like if you turn the gain up a little bit, that it gets a little bit brighter. So I turned that to 100, which is probably too much. Right, so it strangely fills out. The highs are back. The lows get a little bit tighter. I don't know if that's an inherent quality of the real pedal as well. Let's see what this 10 preset is. So it's the level at 53 and the gain at 90. Through the AC30 again. So just still too woofy for me, not tight enough. I wouldn't mind hearing that with the JCM 800 again, with some higher gain settings. Let's see what happens there. Right, so do the level all the way up and gain at 90. Sure, that sounds fine. But that's doing this. So there we have a little bit of something. So if you turn the gain up, it does seem to brighten up and help clear up some of that inherent woofiness in the bass. Honestly, I still don't really like this one. Maybe there's someone out there that knows how these are supposed to be used, but not a fan. Let's move on from that one. Alright, so up now we have the new Octave Fuzz, based on the Dunlop JH-OC1 Octavio. This is another one of those old pedals, and if you look, they actually they did pretty good on the graphic here. This is pretty cool. So if you go and find these old units on Reverb, a lot of them are looking like that. They're running about $400, these guys, because of course Jimi Hendrix kind of had a hand in making them famous. There is an MXR version of it, just called the MXR Octavio. That one runs brand new for like $130. So in full disclosure, I myself am not really a big fan of fuzz and octave fuzz and that kind of thing. So I'm going to get through this the best that I can. So I do know a little bit of history when it comes to like Jimmy's gear. So we had, of course, you know, early Marshall stuff. The earliest I can get is whatever JTM 45 model Headrush happened to model in the Headrush unit. So that's what I've got. So legend has it, of course, he came across one of these cool little Marshall amps and turned the volume all the way up and blew everybody away, both in terms of his playing and in sheer volume. So that was still somewhat unheard of then, around his time, to just crank a guitar amp to the point where it's distorting. That really wasn't desirable. So anyway, so we've got the J45 model, or the JTM45. And those settings that I just showed you, they sound like this. Right, so totally crank JTM45, the normal volume all the way down, because we're about to get a whole lot of extra bass from this octave fuzz. So Headrush's default settings that they decided to package with this is the volume at 75% and the fuzz at 50. And that sounds like this. I understand that a sound like that isn't really meant for full open chord playing. It's more meant for riffing and lead kind of stuff. So I just wanted to show you kind of something equivalent to how it sounds without it. But this is what that sounds like with some more lead stuff. So I'll have to let the fuzz aficionados decide if that sounds about right, if that's to be expected from one of these Octavios with a cranked old Marshall like that. Because I really don't know. I have never even played through a real fuzz pedal. I just know that from what I've heard, I'm not really a big fan of fuzz. But let's try with the volume a little bit lighter. We'll go to like 70%. Let's hear that. Alright, probably a little less. Let's do halfway. Reasonable JTM45 sound. Now with the octave fuzz. I don't know. Did I get it about right? I'm really not sure. Let's try some of the other presets maybe. So there's a full drive, a light, and a medium. Let's try light. So that's supposed to sound like this. Maybe this you can use with the totally cranked JTM45. Alright, so we got more of this going on. Let's try another preset. Let's do full drive. So the fuzz at 100. Okay, this ought to be good. Alright, it's just so... To me, it's just so uncontrollable. There's so much bass. People love fuzz. It's legendary. Legendary people have used it. That's all fine and great. I'm sure this is largely user error on my part. And I'm aware that certain kinds of fuzz circuits are really finicky about things like power supply or battery. Whether the battery is all the way full or, you know, 3/4 of the way dead, that kind of stuff. The guitar volume, that level going into them. I know that they're really loved for their sensitivity to those kinds of things. Honestly, I just don't know enough about them. I don't care enough about them. But you know, I tried to get as close as I can with some kind of sound here. But let's go back to the default setting, and let's go to a clean amp now. I'm sure there's plenty of kids that, or people that were kids, when fuzz pedals kind of came out and were a big thing, that they had a nice clean Fender guitar amp, right? So we've got a Fender Twin, just at stock settings, nothing special going on there. Turn the fuzz off, and that sounds like this. Right, so they bring their fuzz pedal home because they heard Jimi Hendrix uses one of these. They saw it in a magazine, and it sounds like this. I imagine that would have been pretty disappointing back in the day. So I don't know, maybe the secret is you gotta crank the amp or something, or, you know, let's just go crazy on the EQ. Let's do that. Let's not have the vibrato on. So it's doing some cool stuff when you crank the amp up. I mean, that sounds nice and thick, right? Let's go with some lighter settings again. Let's do this medium. Let's do this medium setting here. Okay. So if I was that same kid and I got that sound out of my amp that only previously did clean, I would think that was pretty cool. Better than what I had going on before. So here's the light preset. I liked it better with more fuzz in there, but I think you pretty much get the idea. I'm gonna call it quits on the octave fuzz for now, and let's just move on.